Okay, calm down.
Camila, tell us about what just happened in Peru. We talked about this a little bit with VJ, and you've been talking about this at Kawsachun News. So tell us about what's happening there.
Okay, so I'm going to take a peek to see what the updated
Okay.
death toll is. So actually, they just released a 5 p.m. update, which says the Ministry of Health, which says that now 26 people have been killed during the protests across the country. And this is 26 civilians, the majority of which, 14 of them in Ayacucho, and in about 8 or 9 other regions. And so what we're seeing in Peru, as VJ said, is, it's going to continue. So right now, just a few minutes ago, the Congress approved a measure to bring up the general elections to April 2024. And last week, we had heard that the de facto regime head, who was the vice president of Pedro Castillo, she came out on national television to try to calm the protests and said that she would be moving elections up. This is one of the major demands. People are obviously really angry. They want the release of Pedro Castillo, who they say is a legitimate president. They want this de facto president to step down. They want the Congress to close the way in which it was supposed to be dissolved by Pedro Castillo. And they want elections immediately, a constituent assembly, and a new constitution. But immediate elections is one of the most important things. They already think the legislature is completely illegitimate. They don't want this, what they consider to be an unpopular, illegitimate Congress to rule over a new set of elections, nor do they want this supposed president to govern over elections. They want, as soon as possible to be able to go to the polls. If they can't reinstate the popular government, which came to power winning more than half of all total votes, and the only person with legitimacy, then they want new elections. And so she said that she would go to the Congress to get them to bring up the elections to April 2024. That's what has taken place this evening. The Congress has voted in favor of that. But what people were asking for was elections in 2023, in the new year, as soon as it can be organized. It's a very difficult thing to organize elections, especially when all of these institutions are seen as illegitimate. But that's what people had called for. So now we're talking about elections 16 months from now. So I think this is only going to fuel anger. People are going to be even more upset. And of course, people are really outraged because of the state repression that we're seeing, just absolute brutality. And it's a lot of what we saw in Bolivia during the coup. The people who are getting killed right now, who are getting massacred, are in these rural areas of working class people and are almost across the board indigenous. If you see the sort of like compilations of their little photos, they're all young men. A lot of them are teenagers. I would say at least half of them are teenagers, and all of them are men to my knowledge, but they're all coming from these different provinces and for the most part, not major cities. We saw, as VJ mentioned, they were shooting from helicopters. Some people have been getting killed by bullet wounds, but also getting killed by the use of tear gas. I mean, if you launch a tear gas canister at close range, it could actually kill someone. And we've seen, tear gas canisters get lodged in people's eye sockets, go through people's heads. This has happened in the repression against indigenous people in Ecuador, in Bolivia, and now in Peru. It's unbelievable that this continues to be a tactic. And of course, it's being denounced by human rights organizations in Peru, internationally, as well as a lot of leaders from around the continent have denounced this, but unfortunately, it's continuing. So, we're seeing a lot of parallels with Bolivia. Just a few days ago, ALBA TCP, which is the Bolivarian Alliance, which is about 10 countries, they held a meeting and they stated their position there. And it's pretty obvious that people are not going along with the coup. They are, the presidents of these countries are either outright saying that they don't recognize this de facto president, or they are not necessarily saying that, but they're continuing to refer to Pedro Castillo as the president, and they're saying that he's a political prisoner and that he was ousted in a legislative coup. That's 10 countries. Apart from that, the president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, came out last week saying that they repudiate this coup and it's a coup against Pedro Castillo. I mean, they came out and said that obviously because of what happened to Mel Zelaya in the coup that was orchestrated by the US and Canada against Honduras in 2009. And then additionally, a statement was put out by these 4 countries that have been kind of doing stuff together, not as an official bloc, but Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, now with Petro, and Bolivia. They put out another statement, calling for the protection of the physical integrity of Pedro Castillo, referring to him as president and everything like that. I mean, that's a whole lot of countries in our region that are refusing to go along with what's happening here. And the person who is supposed to be, the de facto leader, president here, was the vice president. She was technically democratically elected to be the vice president, but people say that she's lost legitimacy. So they're not going along with that. Then this evening, everything's happening right now. So Mexico has been one of the loudest countries, including in AMLO's daily press conferences, saying this is a coup. It was a legislative coup. In every way he can possibly say it, he's been saying, that they don't agree with what's going on. They always preface it and follow it by saying, we're a country that believes in not interfering in the sovereign affairs of other countries, but I'm just saying that this was a coup. So now the foreign ministry of Peru, of the de facto regime, has declared the Mexican ambassador in Peru persona non grata. Basically, they're kicking out the Mexican ambassador because they've just had enough of all the protests from the embassies. And most of the protests have been like just Maduro on his like nightly streams talking to his own domestic audience. But of course, the regime in Peru is following all this. So they're kicking out the Mexican ambassador. So it's kind of like a really tense situation. They have no legitimacy, obviously, within the country. That's why we're seeing these vast protests and the blockades. The road blockades are taking place in regions across the country. The National Police actually puts out these maps every day on their social media that shows how many and where the different highway protests are around the country. And there's just tons of them. And of course, in those like rural communities where there's large indigenous populations. And they've also been shutting down airports and threatening to shut down large things like that.